All right, so as advertised, we're going to be having a candidates forum now. We have 3 campaigns for Congress in the 7th Congressional District. And the 7th Congressional District covers almost all of Woodhaven. The only pieces it excludes are the Forest Park co-ops and any houses, a few dozen houses that are north of Parkland South. The Congressional primary will be Tuesday, June 28th. And fortunately, we have representatives from all 3 campaigns here. What we'll do is we'll have them each deliver a 4-minute opening statement, and then they'll field questions and answer questions from the audience. We ask you, when you ask a question, to limit it to 1 minute. And we'll ask the campaigns to keep their answers to 2 minutes. We know that that's not a lot of time, but we're likely, as you've seen, to get a lot of questions from residents. That's how they tend to operate. So I would like to ask from Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez's office, Evelyn Cruz, to come to the front. I'd like to ask Jeff Curzon, who's running for Congress, to come up. And I'd like to ask Michael Tobman, who's representing Youngman Lee, to come up to the front. Thanks to all the candidates and all the presidents. Okay. So we're going to keep strict time. Remember, 4 minutes for the opening statements. And we'll start off with Evelyn. Would you care to begin by making... Well, in that case, if you're willing to defer, I'm perfectly happy to have Michael Tobin, who was the first arrival, to begin by delivering a 4-minute statement, unless he would not like to.
I'm happy to do whatever you want.
All right. Why don't you take it?
I don't need the mic. That's fine. Thank you. But there's no way you guys 3 minutes are going to remember what's 3 minutes and what's 4 minutes. If someone throws something at me when I have 30 or 40 seconds left, not that. So my name is Michael Tobin, which is of absolutely no consequence, except I'm the communications director for Youngman Lee, who's running for Congress here in the 7th Congressional District. So I've been in government politics for 20 plus years. I love it. I'm an attorney by training, and I will do anything to keep me from having to practice law. So, and that would be better for any of the clients that I'd want to have. So, about a year ago, 7-8 months ago, community leaders in Chinatown and Sunset Park, which are 2 very large Asian American communities in the 7th Congressional District, which of course all you know is a vast and very diverse congressional district. So of course Woodhaven, South large parts of Ozone Park, Cypress Hill, a piece of Ridgewood, Brooklyn Heights, Dumbo, Williamsburg, Gowanus, Carroll Gardens, Cobble Hill, Brooklyn Heights, Little Italy, Chinatown, Lower East Side, small piece of the East Village from Avenue D all the way over to the river, and a bunch of other neighborhoods. So Chinatown and Sunset Park are just 2 neighborhoods in a very vast, very diverse district. Community leaders there, the Chinese American community, got together and said, Evelyn, you're lovely, so don't forgive me, said the Congresswoman, who's been in office for 24 years, really has very little relationship with the Chinese American community, with Chinatown and Sunset Park. We need to explore what other communities are hearing and what their relationships with the incumbent, the long time, decades-long incumbent is. So I got involved, visited community block associations, parent council, CDCs and parent associations and civics throughout the district. And what we heard was a lot of the same frustrations. In some cases, just no connection. One community board member in Woodhaven said, I've been going to community board meetings for 20 years, and I've never met the Congresswoman at any of these meetings. And we're hearing this again and again. In Brooklyn Heights, we heard parents at PSA say, we have the feeling the incumbent counts on the relative affluence of our community to gloss over the fact that maybe we don't have needs like other communities have, but we need to be paying more attention. So when you run against an incumbent, it's very interesting, because I was very negative just now. I led with a negative, and maybe I shouldn't have done that. But when you run against an incumbent, the first thing you have to talk to the voters about is why they need to fire the incumbent. And then you have to talk about why you got to hire my guy. Right? So it's a 2-step process. So who's Youngman Lee? Immigrated to the United States when he was a teenager, Columbia undergraduate, NYU Law, started a community health clinic in Lower Manhattan, went back between college and law school, opened up a community law practice in Chinatown, did that for 10, 12 years, was appointed by Mario Cuomo to be first deputy banking superintendent during the last 4 or 5 years of the Cuomo administration. And then with the experience as an attorney and a public health advocate, he went and became a financial turnaround expert, helping to rescue community banks, which are not vast JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs type institutions. They're the ones that lend to small businesses and homeowners looking to buy in the district. And then, so these community leaders we met with decided, you know, that was a bottom-up thing, and Youngman was looking for the next thing in his community service and said, you know what, I'll run for office. And they said, sounds good. So we've been going around the district, running around the community, vast district, diverse district, and we're getting really great encouragement from everyone. Last thing, what we're saying again and again, and those of you who are registered Democrats with a certain vote history, maybe have gotten the mail, the incumbent, and I don't know how one does this exactly, when the Democrats had the House majority, and there was a Democrat in the White House, she brought back the least amount of money to the district than any member of Congress in all of New York State. So Republicans who were not in the House majority and didn't have a Republican in the White House brought back more money to their district than the incumbent did. And to me, if you're going to show up and do the work, it's an easier thing to do than not putting the work in and not bringing the money home. I can get into the fundraising record, things like that, but I'm here to answer any questions. Jeff, I didn't get to you. I apologize. I don't really know you. You seem like a good enough guy. He's actually on the ballot only because I fucked up. Forgive my language. I served the Board of Elections before I served him, and I should have served him before the Board of Elections, but he didn't actually get enough signatures to qualify, so I suppose you owe me a thanks. What can I answer?
We'll have the other candidates deliver their opening statements.
Thank you.
Jeff, would you care to go next? No. Thank you. Do you want the mic?
I don't need it. So, I met some of you when I ran in 2014. My name is Jeff Curzon, and I currently live in the Lower East Side. I ran in 2014 on a message of campaign finance reform, which is not very interesting to many people, but to put it in the context of what Mr. Coleman just said and what Councilmember Ulrich was saying, at the City Council level of government, we have participatory budgeting. It's very transparent. You can see where the money is going. And you generally have a sense that maybe the council member has a silly sense of humor, but he's genuinely working for your best interest. And how is it possible that he was elected? Well, in New York City, we have a system of campaign finance that allows for matching funds. We have publicly funded elections because I think there are enough progressives in our city that, and this is not just a progressive issue, because I know the council member is a Republican. It's a democratic, representative government, fairness, and openness obligation to have a government that we trust in, a government that represents our interests. So I could talk more about that. I grew up in Watertown, Massachusetts, which is a community very similar to Woodhaven. I'm very impressed with the Woodhaven Residents Block Association and the work you guys do, because I know from the time that I ran for Congress in 2014 and studies that I've read that civic participation in our country is on a big decline. And I think we see wealth and income inequality go like this, civic engagement going like this. The cost of financial intermediation, that's the work that bankers do to issue stocks, bonds, loans, is now 9% of our gross domestic product. Historically, it's been closer to 2 or 3%. And what we're seeing is banks are getting more and more bigger and more politically powerful. They crashed the economy 2007, 8, 9. The incumbent who takes money, campaign contributions from these banks through their political action committees, I think has a severe conflict of interest. And it's not just with the banking sector. Some of you may be upset by the recent events in Orlando. And then you have to ask, well, who are the members of Congress blocking this reform? It's the members of Congress who are blocking the reform are the ones who are taking money from the gun manufacturers through the National Rifle Association. But the incumbent doesn't really understand that if she takes this bank money and serves on the House Financial Services Committee, that there are other lawmakers who are working on the Government Oversight Committee or the Judiciary Committee that might introduce legislation to require background checks. That reform is being blocked because our whole system of money in politics basically favors these special interest groups, and it goes completely against the interests of us as citizens. So if we don't change this, we're going to have more wealth and income inequality, more gun violence, more damage to our environment. You know, Woodhaven has, I understand, has illegal basement sublets. It's very similar to what's happening in Sunset Park. You have, and Cypress Hills and other areas of the community, the district, where families from 3 generations are squeezing into homes because young people are graduating from college with too much debt. And you know, we're not really investing in ourselves here. And the reason we're not doing that is, I think, because we don't have a fair campaign finance system. So what's different from 2014 when I ran is that I'm spending up to $5,000 of my own money. I'm not even raising money from individual donors this time. So thanks for your consideration.
Excuse me. I'm just listening and digesting everything. My name is Evelyn. I represent Congresswoman Velasquez. Unfortunately, she was en route from DC here, and she's expected to arrive about now, hopefully, at Penn Plaza, because they deferred all flights in the afternoon due to the rain. But I'm here representing her, and I've known many of you from attending meetings here. And I want to say that the Congresswoman is seeking re-election because there's still more work to be done. Congresswoman Velasquez, since elected, has been a fighter for working families. She has been representing our communities that have been shut out and voiced out of the legal system, of affordable housing, of fair pay in our community, that have faced discrimination and environmental degradation. And we have been working, I've been a staff with the member, we have been working diligently over these past several years to improve the quality of life. I don't know Mr. Tobman, sorry. But listening to Mr. Tobman, it pains me to hear that, that he believes, that he feels, that Mr. Youngman believes that the Congresswoman has not been fairly representing our Asian community. In fact, she has been very good representing our Sunset Park community and our Chinatown community. She has been a staunch advocate for fairness and equality when it comes to healthcare services, when it comes to community services, fair of the legal system. The Charles B. Wang Center, for example, is one of these programs that Mr. Youngman may have started, but we have consistently funded. We have helped the Chinese Planning Community Council. She was just recently endorsed by over 40 community leaders of the Chinatown community, of the Sunset Park community, because of her dedication and commitment to ensuring that there is equality or equity in our Asian community. So I don't want to make this an issue about race, but Mr. Tubman raised the issue, and I think it's important for you to know and to read the record that we have. When an officer was hazed in the military, and Officer Denny Chen, he was killed in the Army. Congresswoman Velasquez was there. She brought the families to the Pentagon to find out, to investigate what happened to Denny Chen. She was there for this community. When Chinatown was shut down after 9/11, small businesses in the Chinese community were devastated. As you remember, Giuliani shut down City Hall, and business was just really bad in that part of the district. Congresswoman Velasquez worked with the administration to reopen the corridors of business in that Chinese community. We came down with a delegation. We made it a priority to increase walk-to-work jobs back in the Chinese community, and also for commerce. It was critical for their sustainability. Gubernur's hospitals, we just funded over, I think, $70 million in a new wing to assist locals in the Chinese community in Chinatown. So don't believe the hype, read the facts, and this is what we are here for. That's it? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so before we go into questions, I just want to go over a few rules. So this is a forum, not a debate. The campaigns are here to answer questions, that's one. Two, if you have any questions to ask, please raise your hand. Do not call out, do not interrupt. We'll try our best to get to everyone in the room. 3, I will be the only one recognizing the audience to ask questions. I'm asking candidates, please do not point or reach out to anyone to ask a question. 4, you may ask a question, you may not ask a follow-up question, even if you feel the question has not been answered. If you like another question, please raise your hand again, and after we get around the room, I will try my best to get back to you. And the last point, each candidate has 2 minutes to answer the question. I know that doesn't sound like a lot of time, but I'm sure if we have a few questions, you know, why don't you try and get everyone to ask questions, maybe we can get back if we have time. So if everyone, I think, if we follow these rules, we can get along and maybe we can get a few questions out each, okay? So with that, first question. Vance?
Mr. President, I have 3 questions, one for each of the candidates, so I hope you recognize me further along after the question. The first one, I'll go in order of those who spoke first. Woodhaven is arguably, Mr. Tobe, Woodhaven is arguably one of the most diverse communities in the most diverse county in the country, in the world, exactly. So my question to you is, what on earth is a Chinese-American issue that isn't an issue for everyone else in the community?
That's deep. And I love it. The truth is, New York City is vastly diverse. And keep using that word. New York City is a diverse city. Queens, I've heard, is the most diverse county spot in the world. I think something like 154 languages spoken in Queens. There is more in common between communities than not. And I would sort of turn your question around and say, there
Well,
is
this is
no...
what you said.
No, I meant to the communities themselves, whether it is the funding of community organizations other than these top tier, right? It's like the equivalent of giving to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Yes, giving to the Charles Wayne Community Center is great, giving to Grosvenor Hospital is wonderful, but who's going in and working with individual chambers of commerce or block associations? So I would say there is no such thing as a uniquely demographic issue, as much as these are communities who have felt underrepresented by the long-time incumbent. Until just recently, I think in 2012, she had a race, and she said on a New York One debate, well, you know what, I'm going to hire a Chinese-speaking staff person now, and I think that only happened after 24 years in Congress last year, maybe in late 2012. You mentioned Danny Chen, thank you for that work, but where was the Congresswoman at the Peter Liang rally? Because Senator Marty Golden was there, Councilman Peter Koo was there, Assemblyman Bill Colton was there, Assemblyman Peter Boddy was there, Youngman was there, John Liu was there, Grace May was there. We didn't see the Congresswoman. So in that respect, a community that is becoming increasingly organized and is a very vital part of our civic space does feel like it has been neglected by the long-time incumbent. But what we then found out is a lot of communities throughout this diverse district felt the same way. So that was the jumping-off point that led to larger conversations.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to answer that question?
Like I said before, the Congresswoman has represented long time Chinatown community, the Sunset Park community, equitably. And like I said, we have a lot of the grassroots community-based organizations that are with her. What we may not have are investors that are interested in creating high luxury developments in these communities to price out lower income constituents, and that is something that the Congresswoman has stood against. So we may be encountering that kind of opposition, but we stand firmly in the work that we have done in helping our Asian American brothers and sisters. In addition to that, we have always hired. We've always had an Asian representative on staff. All 8 of them participated at the press conference. Many of them moved on. Some of them are working for Melissa Mark Beverly. Others are going on to be educators in Queens. So it's not an issue that we just hired an Asian representative. That's incorrect.
I can say that when I represent the district, I'll have bilingual or trilingual staff members who can help me communicate with everyone.
I've been trying to hire trilingual campaign staff, if you can find them, please let me know.
I know one who's worked with me in 2014. He was Dominican American, who's African American, who's fluent in Spanish and studied in China. And I live close to Chinatown in the Lower East Side, and one day he was speaking to me in Chinese. I was trying to learn, and it was great to see the expression of, I think, a Chinese American who walked by and saw this black man speaking to a white man in Chinese.
I was kidding, you didn't have to answer.
What I understand is the biggest issue in Chinatown, Manhattan right now is parking. There's a bit of a diaspora there, and the community is very tight-knit and family-oriented, so people who may have moved out of the city still want to come in and see relatives, but it's very difficult to find parking, and that is perhaps a good segue into our infrastructure, which I don't think we're adequately funding. I took the J train out of here. It was very slow, it made a lot of noise. When I lived in Bushwick, I lived on the second floor of Broadway, and the train would go right outside my window. I didn't have an air conditioner, so in August, I would open the window, and it's like the train goes back and forth each way. And I eventually got used to it and moved out into a nicer building, but ever since that time, I lived underneath the train, or anytime, Michael brought up how I got on the ballot. I walked around the district, including I did a walk from Lower East Side to here, gathering signatures, but it's so noisy on Jamaica Avenue underneath the J train, and it's noise pollution. It affects the quality of life. And I think there is a way to make the J train accessible to seniors and people with disabilities and move it underground. And that's what I would like to do.
That would be great.
Next question.
We've heard a lot about some of the other communities in your very, very large, spread out, boomerang, gerrymandered district. I'd like you all to talk a little bit about Woodhaven. Can you show us what you know about our neighborhood and about the issues that are directly going to affect the people in this room? Can we start with Jeff? Can we do a reverse order? Would you mind?
Sure. Well, I brought up in my intro the issue of illegal basement sublets, and I think there's overcrowding and housing. I think a lot of the issues that pertain to Woodhaven pertain to Sunset Park and people on the Lower East Side. Access to healthcare when the Democrats controlled the House and the Senate and the White House, they passed the Affordable Care Act. However, just like any other bill in Congress, it was written by the lobbyists for the benefit of the insurance companies. So there's more customers now. But the people who are getting Obamacare can't afford $5,000 deductibles, and it's unreasonable, in my opinion, to ask citizens who are not experts in insurance or in healthcare, cannot accurately affect their needs. I'm one of them, and as someone who's studied in Canada and Europe, I see that they're much more well-functioning societies when people do not have to worry about access to healthcare. So I would like to see a Medicare for all system, and I think that would benefit the people of Woodhaven. As a representative from Woodhaven, I would also draw attention to my fellow members in Congress that our congressional district is 10% less economically well off than the average congressional district around the United States. Couple that with the fact of New York being one of the most expensive place to live in the city, it basically means that the people of Woodhaven and the rest of our district are struggling more than the average American in terms of economic well-being. So one of the jobs of the representative is to bring home the bacon, so to speak. I will be working on doing that for Woodhaven to invest in the community as much as I can. And there's a lot of young people in Woodhaven going to high school, and I think that it should not be a limiting reagent to how far you go in your studies as to the wealth of your family. I think at one point we did not have public education that was paid for at the high school level. I think as we advance as a society and we become more digitized and robotic, we need to further our educational goals and provide tuition-free public colleges and universities. Thank you.
Sure. So, the question has to do with Woodhaven, and here in our community of Woodhaven, it's one of the most home ownership and stabilized neighborhoods we have. And the concerns that we always hear from our constituents is, as Jeff mentioned, the overcrowding conditions, illegal basements, illegal conversions happening. And so in Washington, the Congresswoman has worked on a series of legislation to protect existing homeowners, to help stop foreclosure prevention programs, home ownership counseling services, which are available too. We've secured funding for Queens organizations and East New York organizations, because as we know, we're now faced with the rezoning process of East New York. That's going to have a triple up effect to this community, a trickle up effect to this neighborhood. I've shared this at several other meetings. This is going to eventually increase property taxes in our neighborhood. The business corridor is going to be impacted by all of this. So in terms of protecting our community, this is something that's very key to Nydia. Home ownership preservation and also tenant right protection. We have a lot of our seniors that have called our office that landlords, new homeowners are now asking them to relocate. There are not a lot of protections for 1 and 2 home families or 1 to 4 home families in our community, and that is something that has to be addressed at the state level, but we are doing everything we can to address that. She's also introduced legislation to get employers to get a tax incentive for them to get a tax credit in order for them to keep their employees at work and to also help them with the rental assistance. It's one of our newer initiatives, something that we've worked on over the past year, and we're hoping that that can pass in Congress and be implemented here in our neighborhood. The other issue we're always concerned with is transportation and infrastructure. The community has been talking about the SVS Select Bus Service, getting an elevator at the Woodhaven train station to address the handicapped needs of our community, improve the J line. And we have been working with the state representatives on the Brooklyn side. At one time, it was Darrell Towns who was the chair of the Transportation Committee to improve the infrastructure of the train line running from Woodhaven to Brooklyn. Thank you.
So I echo all of Evelyn's sentiments, but I would add to that middle school. There is a middle school crisis in New York City. It's when young families, when they're in New York City, decide maybe it's time to move to the suburbs, because especially families with a few children within like a 2 or 3, 4-year span, middle school years are when we see the exodus to Long Island and to the river towns up in Westchester and beyond. And I think keeping families in Woodhaven, keeping families in New York City depends on middle school. There are great elementary schools everywhere, and the kids learn at home, and they have after-school programs at Little League and Catholic Basketball League and all that. But it's really middle school where things tend to get knocked off the rails. So starting off with middle school, mentioned the J train, especially over at Woodhaven Boulevard. But I would say we need to be a bit more creative and we need to be a bit more ambitious, because what a member of Congress can do, what any elected official can do, and I know Senator Adamo does this, and I know Councilman Ulrich, and I know certainly Councilwoman Crowley does this, they organize, right? Everybody talks about being a community organizer, but what does that really mean? In Coney Island, there's a city councilman named Mark Trader, who's chair of the Resiliency and Recovery Committee. He has done in Coney Island, post-Sandy, more than has been done in Red Hook, despite the Congresswoman and Mayor de Blasio, who's very fond of press conferences, but apparently not releasing his emails to his consultants, have done more in Coney Island, Trader, than the Congresswoman and the Mayor have done in Red Hook, despite being there over a year ago at a press conference and saying we need to fix these things. Mark did that by organizing with the U.S. Senate, with the House, it's Hakeem Jeffries down there, and with every level of government, and forcing them to do it, even though it's not necessarily the purview of a city council member, because NYCHA, the city is the flow-through of federal funds. So it can all be better based on organizing and bringing all the members, diverse communities in the 7th together to organize for these efforts. So, again, let me just, my final point, introducing legislation is one thing, but when you pass 7 laws in 24 years, it feels like there's a bit of a disconnect. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next question?
Are there any I'll get a quick follow-up just to say one thing. The Smith 9th Street station is on the F line. It's the segue into Red Hook. And they did the MTA did a multi-million-dollar renovation there while Dan Cumberland was in office. And what shocks me about that subway station is that you have a very nice escalator bringing you up to the first floor, a very nice escalator bringing you up to the third floor, but if you have a cane, a stroller, a walker, a wheelchair, you're not getting up to the platform. So they spent all this money to make this new subway station, and they didn't think, hey, maybe we should put an elevator. You know, a federal member of Congress might just provide funds to the MTA so that they could better, you know, update our trains and our subways. But you know, I think that talk about Woodhaven, what happens in Gowanus or Red Hook affects what happens in Woodhaven too, because you know there might be $1 million spent on updating the Woodhaven station, but unless you're yelling and screaming, you're not going to get an elevator.
Yeah, I just want to add that what Mr. Tobin said is true. Coney Island got a lot of resources, but Coney Island was hit harder than Red Hook. Coney Island homes, it's a long stretch, but yet the Congresswoman was successful in securing $564 million for Red Hook and $611 million for the Lower East Side in federal funds that were needed for post-Sandy public housing repairs and rehabilitation. $500 million is not a drop in the bucket.
That's national.
And when you're giving,
That's
no,
for the
that's
whole
money,
country. There's
that's
no-
money, no, that's money that we allocated. And if you're up to date with what we did, it was all printed in the New York Times and the Post and all these newspapers, giving a breakdown of the resources that were brought to the community. Unfortunately, I think both gentlemen did say that we have a community, some parts are really still one of the most vulnerable. If you live near the waterfront, Red Hook residents do, they were devastated, but yet we were successful in securing funding. In addition to that, Congresswoman Velasquez, she wrote the law, the Superstorm Sandy Relief and Disaster Loan Program. That law was just reopened again to allow small businesses and residents that were impacted to at least stay claim to resources.
Small
Thank you.
businesses don't need more debt, they need loan forgiveness.
We're gonna go to the next question.
Sorry.
That will take a full act of Congress, and you know.
So do it.
How are
Next
we gonna
question.
do this with the Republican leadership, please?
We'll take our next question.
Oh, you know this better than we do. You say you're a political operative for years.
I'm sorry, folks, can we ask the next guest here?
I'm sorry.
You know, local issues are fine, but I think for a congressional election, we gotta really be looking at more global issues that affect the whole country. And you know, it'll trickle down to us. One thing that's been bothering me a lot in the last couple of years is Social Security. The Social Security system stinks. The government has allowed it to go into downfall. I did my own research on this also. I found out that there's no guarantee that you're going to collect Social Security. It's not in the Social Security law. So they could just say at any time, no, we're not going to give it to you. Cost of living adjustment, that formula is so archaic. No one's done anything to change it in the last 2 years, when I brought it up 2 years ago to our representatives. And even more so for the future. What guarantees, if any of you get in and are now in Congress, what are you going to do to guarantee that Social Security is going to be there for the next generation?
Chuck, you collect the stuff?
Thanks for the question. It's a very serious issue. You know, my attitude with this is that I'm getting gray hairs. I'm going to be a senior citizen very soon, and I see the issue in our district when seniors are getting $1,000 a month, and then they're having to choose between food and medicine, or cutting up their medicine, and it's really tragic. I'd like to start talking about the idea of universal basic income, set a floor for living expenses, food, healthcare, housing, and guarantee that to every senior, so that $1,000 is not enough to live on in New York City. Maybe $2,000 a month is if you're budgeting. So when I'm elected, I will do everything to preserve the Social Security system and to strengthen it, because I think we owe our seniors who have contributed so much to our society, the dignity that they deserve in old age, and that's essentially guaranteeing a social security system that is fair and that gives them the money that they need for living expenses. One thing that really surprises me about the social security system is that multimillionaires still get it when they don't need it, and then other people who don't get enough, are struggling. So I think there's a way to balance out the system to make it more fair and equitable. And having a universal basic income floor, I think, is one way to do that. Michael?
Thank you. The universal income is bandied about. Charles Murray had a fascinating piece in the Journal of the Times about it the other day, but it actually involves and requires the doing away with all of the entitlement programs. So I don't think we're quite there yet in terms of figuring out what this could look like, but it's interesting that it's part of the conversation now. So thank you for raising it. Social Security is not, you're right, it's not, there's no guarantee that it's going to be there despite contributing into the system for a life's worth of work. It depends on a healthy, robust economy. You need to have more people contributing to the system than there are people drawing down on the system. And frankly, that's just not the demographics of the United States right now. And while we have students graduating from college and moving back home and waiting years to start a family and buy a home, and then the stimulus that has on the economy and their burden with student debt, that, you've heard the term trickle down, that actually trickles up. That inactivity trickles up. So jump-starting the economy, providing more robust loan forgiveness, finding ways to get younger people more confident about their future so that they're getting married. I can't say that, I can't make people get married, but buying a home and making these purchases and being the adults we were when we were their age. But I look at some of these young people and I'm thinking I had 2 kids already, but that's a separate story. Contributes, trickles up, and helps keep the system robust. We could talk about things, and I know the Congresswoman has discussed this over the years, and other members talk about lifting the age for retirement. I don't like that because that's not the deal you made when you started contributing to the system. I don't think it's fair to change the rules just because the rules of the economy have changed. It is a bit of a rigged economy. So it really is about bolstering the economy as it is, getting young people better jobs, better paying jobs, helping to alleviate student debt, get them buying homes, apartments, and really stimulating the economy in a way that contributes to the solvency, long-term solvency of the system.
Yeah, I kind of agree with, believe it or not, with some of what Ellen said. And it's so true, because we do have to stimulate the economy. That is critical. That is why, after Ranking Chair of Small Business, Velasquez continues to work with the Chambers of Commerce, not only in Queens or in Brooklyn, but nationwide, to discuss, to find solutions that will help create a robust economy. And this is what we continue to do. But we also have to recognize that we have a lot of companies that have left the United States, and we're trying to rein them in, close up those loopholes, and bring those jobs back to our water lines, our front lines. That's very critical. The other issue with the Social Security is that, if you may recall, back in 2007, 2008, before the market crashed, there was a whole big push by the Bush administration to privatize it. And if you recall, they wanted to privatize Social Security, put it back in your pocket, put it in your mutual fund account, let your broker take care of your Social Security assets. And guess what? The market crashed. How many of us in this room doesn't know someone who lost thousands of dollars in the stock market when it crashed? Had Nadia voted yes on that particular vote, guess what? She would have been responsible for the loss of a lot of workers' savings, life savings. So we know that that doesn't work. We need to see how we can change the formula, but yet preserve it. We need to strengthen it. And this is a work in progress. It is not only this Congress, but it's been the Congresses of the past. We need to strengthen it, find a way of preserving it, and make it fair and equitable for future recipients.
Thank you. Next question?
While we're on global issues, how about the environment? Climate change, including fossil fuels excessively. Is there some way to address these issues?
Congresswoman Velasquez has been a strong advocate for environmental justice. When we first started, we had a district that was wrongfully impacted by environmental degradation. We had a series of power plants spewing particle matter on our streets. We had the Williamsburg Bridge that was being sandblasted without any kind of covering. We had Radiac in our district, which emits hazardous waste materials. You know, they're being transported on the streets without any covering. We had CV1, one of the community districts with the largest number of waste transfer stations in the Eastern Coast. We had the Gowanus Canal, and we have Newtown Creek. And I share all of these examples because Congresswoman made a pledge when she was elected to fight environmental degradation, and that is the pledge that she has kept. We have worked to secure that the Newtown Creek was superfunded, meaning a super cleanup by the EPA. The Gowanus Canal is another body of water superfunded for major cleanup. We got rid of the power plants in our neighborhood that was emitting particle matters and causing high levels of asthma. We had a asthma choke lane throughout Williamsburg, Brooklyn, throughout Bush Street, and parts of East New York. When it comes to global change, she supports alternative energy. We definitely are working to reduce fossil fuel. And that is why she voted against the Keystone Pipeline here, and she also voted against it in Puerto Rico. Why? Because these kind of energy uses only create more emissions, and we need to find a way of reducing it, and she's been strong on the environmental justice front.
So what I've been talking about on my campaign is the subsidies that we give to the fossil fuel industry and to the meat industries. I've read different reports about how much the meat industries contribute in terms of methane emissions to creating holes in the ozone layer. But you know, we were talking about Sandy before. You could argue that Sandy was a result of climate change, and I signed on to a project known as the Climate Mobilization that wants to use a World War II style mobilization to create carbon sinks, essentially to plant trees and find other ways to help the environment. I think it was the Daily News a couple of days ago just did a report on lead poisoning in NYCHA. I consider that an environmental hazard. It's really quite embarrassing for me to live in a society where 30% of children are growing up in poverty. And, I think most of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are in these NYCHA buildings that have that changed.
That's right.
So the representative from the representative's office is saying that that's right, but you know, when I talk to people who live in NYCHA about their quality of life, they say it's declined over the last 20 years. And I think the environment, you know, the conditions of our environment have declined over the past 20 years. And just like we're allowing the NRA to fund our elections, we're allowing the meat lobby and meat industries to fund our elections, and we're allowing the fossil fuel industry to fund our elections. So the Republicans generally say that climate change is not real, and the Democrats say it is real. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you can just open the window and see what's going on yourself. You can read scientific reports, but what I think we need to do is take this crisis and these crises affecting our environment and use it as a way to help our economy and create green jobs and green technology.
Thank you. Mike?
Everybody here, Evelyn and I are representing our respective candidates. Jeff himself is the candidate. Agree that climate change is science, and it's not politics. Let me just, yes, right? Yes, to everything said here. The difference being, I mean, again, Youngman is running for Congress against a 24-year incumbent who's running for a 13th two-year term, and I love that number because Nydia's 13th term would be our bad luck. That being said, you know, after, to Jeff's point, talking about NYCHA lead poisoning, well, you know, what's been done in the past 20 years? And we're talking about standing up to Republicans in Congress. Well, you know, what's the record on doing that? And why hasn't there been progress? So, yes, on it being fact, yes, on it being science, and I agree that Sandy and the next storm is a product of human impact on our environment globally. Not just here, but everywhere. But the question is, after 24 years in Congress, you know, if it hasn't worked so far, how about putting somebody new in to give it a try? But I think on the substantive issues, I think creating, I think we're all in agreement.
Okay, can I just add something on NYCHA? Okay, the Congresswoman is one of the senior members on the Public Housing Committee. And as such, she has been a strong advocate for NYCHA residents, public funding for NYCHA. What we have to take into account is that in New York City, there were more than 21 public housing developments that were built by the state and the city of New York. Those were considered orphan developments. They housed thousands and thousands of families. These buildings were orphaned by the city and state. They built them, but they did not fund them. No operation and no capital funding. So guess what? The NYCHA development had to borrow from Peter to pay for Paul. And that hurt a lot of our developments. But with all that said, we were fortunate enough under the Bloomberg administration, along with Senator Chuck Schumer and Congresswoman Velasquez, we were able to secure over $690 million every year for 5 years. I have a list here of all the developments predominantly in our Lower Side community where every single one of these buildings are going to be revamped. Because Nydia knew then, like we know today, that the state and the city failed these developments for more than 20 years, in spite of the fact that the federal government had called upon them to deliver adequate capital and adequate operating funding.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go next question. Anyone else? Nice. Just joking. Back to you guys.
Thank you. I really do wish we had about 3 or 4 more hours, but we don't. Let's talk about something really close to home. Since the alleged SBS plan that's currently out does use federal dollars, this would be something at a congressional level. What are each of your current positions on the current SBS plan? And please tell us what you like about it and what you don't like about it.
I like that somebody's actually having this conversation because it's been too long neglected. I worry about community input. I worry about displacement. I worry about the impact on the community. I can't even begin to. Federal money through these agencies, through DOT, through SBS, through is often passed through to the state and the city, and it's implemented with federal funds, and then they just wash their hands of accountability and they sort of walk away from the project. So I'm not terribly, personally speaking, intimately well versed on this, but I know that it just could be better.
Thank you for an honest answer.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about a lot of things, and I'll tell you what I don't know. And I don't know that I'm in a position to adequately discuss that. I'm not even going to use up all my 2 minutes.
That's exactly what I was hoping to hear.
Jeff?
I don't know too much about it. I know that it's a select bus service to provide transportation, ostensibly to speed up the process where people get on the bus and swipe, and then it takes time away from the bus actually rolling along, getting people where they need to go. I think community input is important. There are great organizations such as the Riders Alliance who I think try to advocate for riders, MTA users' rights. You know, if people are opposed to it, I would like to know why. And if they're in favor of it, that would make sense to me, because generally I think any spending on infrastructure improvements as a general rule is a good idea. You know, because I just had a friend visit me from Europe, and he kept bringing up like third world, and you know, I'm originally from Boston area now, but I've been here. I'm not sure if there's a 5-year or 10-year test, but I consider myself a New Yorker, and you know, I want to be proud of my home, and I think you know, if we're able to get federal investments in our infrastructure, you know, we just have to decide as a community how to use it. That you know, my job will be to represent those voices in the community.
Thank you. So think we all agree on this. And I know I was just 2 weeks ago, we were at the public hearing that DOT conducted at PS 306. It was very interesting to see. It was more, I thought it would be more about getting feedback from the neighborhood, from the residents. I spoke to many here. Alan was there, Martin was there, Bob, everyone was there. And the Congresswoman has always expressed a concern to DOT. These are federal dollars. They have not yet been allocated, okay? And I think we all heard this several months ago when I was here. They haven't been yet allocated. But we also know that if we don't use it, we lose it. And it goes back into the general fund. So the Congresswoman is urging, continues to urge DOT to ensure that we have a transparent process where it's really inclusive of the community. You know, what was shameful when the process started was that they didn't even know there was a commercial corridor on Jamaica Avenue. You have over 300 shops here. How is it that you were not aware of it? You know why? Because plans were being designed at the Ivory Tower with no real community input. If it were not for the outcry of this board, of Maria Thompson, of all the elected officials, they would have never have known about this. So this is why it's critical for all of us collectively to be engaged. I know Assemblyman Mike Miller has been there, Adaba, we're all on the same page. We want a transit system that works for everyone equitably. And remember, the SBA runs through 3 different congressional districts. So the members on the Rockaway side, they're saying, we also need transportation for my constituents. We're in the center, and then further up east. They're all asking for transportation services. So we need to work collaboratively as a community. And that's where media stands. We don't want to impact the local streets because they're too narrow. We don't want traffic being deviated onto your block. It's not fair. We don't need to increase pollution on the corridor. So all of these things have to be monitored.
I would just
Thank you. No follow-ups. No follow-ups. We're not out of time. But no follow-ups. We're out of time. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I would just add to that Sunset Park is struggling with a similar issue with the de Blasio proposed streetcar that folks there see as it's a loss leader. The city's going to lose money on putting a streetcar in Sunset Park, but it's going to be like the High Line in Manhattan. It's a loss leader, and then they're going to develop around it, and folks are going to be concerned.
I want to get to the next question. William?
Well, I love you a lot. You know, I know you for many years. But one of the things that the people have been crying, and we're talking about, we're stretching from the far Rockaways down to here, and the millions of dollars that the SBS wants to spend even on just research and statistics on the that boulevard that stretches from one end to the next. With all that money being spent and all that talk, it rests with 3 congressional districts, you said. Why can't Nydia, team up with the other 2 congressional districts and say, listen, you know what, this is what the people need. Let's get this Rockaway line straight up. It runs from one end to the next, and transportation, it would be a lot easier instead of putting a park up there that people really don't want. They can't keep up with the parks now. What makes you think they're going to keep up with an isolated place where you're going to be a peeping Tom looking at somebody's window?
So what's the question?
So the question is, could we get that rolling? Because that's what the people want.
That's not what everybody wants.
I don't know. I know there was a study done, right? Remember there was a study done, and when the study was conducted, it was estimated that it was going to cost $60 million at that time to even begin to excavate, and then I don't know how many more millions to possibly even attempt to run it. So this is an issue that we all collectively, again, need to present to the U.S. Senators to see where can we find the funding. We are in a climate in Washington that, the funding is not going to be there for a lot of projects. Infrastructure, they talk about infrastructure, but they're not passing the buck or the funding for infrastructure in a lot of communities, in a lot of states. We are fighting. You have a strong delegation in New York City. We are a large urban community. We have a large community that is still living below the poverty level, and that has been a great, that has been a very useful asset when we're out there fighting for these dollars. So we agree that the train may be quicker, but it's getting there and getting it passed. So I don't have an answer. I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer.
Thank you.
Or a better answer.
Well, I think the money that we spend comes from our tax generation, and the wealthy have a disproportionate say in what happens in our politics through the use of their campaign contributions. When I first started campaigning for President Obama, I remember the maximum contribution was $2,300, and the politicians conveniently made that amount go up every cycle, so now that it's $2,700. They couldn't figure out how to do that with minimum wage. But for their own campaign contributions, they do it, and they take these $10,000 PAC contributions from big banks, and it's not just Democrats doing it, it's Republicans as well. So, you know, my idea to help transportation in Woodhaven is to put a faster, much more efficient subway line underground that replace the existing J infrastructure on top of the park. And you know, people will say, well, we can't do that. Well, yes, we can. If I can imagine it, then other people can imagine it. And there's a way to raise that revenue to make that happen. I think the select bus service is potentially something that could be disruptive in the short term, but in the long term might actually help the communities develop and get places where they need to get going faster. But I think the problem with this or any other thing is raising the money. The banks on Wall Street, they don't want a speculation tax. They don't want anything that's going to harm their business model. And so they effectively buy representatives of Congress to stop that change from happening. And then we don't have the change that we need. So that's kind of an indirect response to your question.
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I would say after 24 years in Congress, if the Congresswoman hasn't had the wherewithal or put the effort into organizing this, then there's really no indication, past performance being a pretty sure indicator of future performance, that's going to happen in a 13th term. Long-time incumbency in and itself is not necessarily a disqualifier for another term. You mentioned Senator Schumer. I worked for him as Director of Government Affairs from 01 to 05. And I got a nice call from the Senator's State Director saying the Congresswoman called very upset that a former Schumer staffer is the Communications Director for her opponent. And I said, well, you know, I consider myself yelled at. Thank you. That being said, you know, I think Chuck, my former guy, does a great job. And I think Senator Gillibrand has in her, if not to move on to a cabinet position or the vice presidency one day, to be a long-time incumbent who gets a lot of great things done. So it's not long-time incumbency itself, it's the lack of accomplishments and the lack of interest and the lack of energy in putting together the very thing you said, which is hard work. It's what Mark Traeger did in Coney Island, it's what can be done here. And it hasn't happened till now, so as nice as everybody is, as much as we like each other, there's no sense to think it's going to happen in the future.
I would beg to differ. We are a hardworking office. We love our constituents, and we still have the fire in the belly. And this train runs through 3 congressional districts, and it's starting in the Rockaways, and we have been in discussions about this. And I think that way before we represented Woodhaven, the community has been asking for this, and it hasn't happened on anybody's clock. But we will continue to advocate and find the means of transportation that can benefit our working class community, our disabled, our young students, to ensure that they're guaranteed fair and equitable transportation across Queens and across the city of New York.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you. And right now, just one, if we can get a nice round of applause for everyone showing up tonight, answering our questions. Thank you.